I love the Metroid franchise. It's a series that doesn't really get a whole lot of releases, but every game that comes out for it is usually a very high quality game. And yet for some odd reason they've just never sold all that well. I mean, the highest selling game in this series was the original Metroid Prime on the GameCube, and that sold less than 3 million units. So for some odd reason this has just never been a series that has sold very well. This October we will be getting the next entry in the Metroid series with the release of Metroid Dread, and I am extremely excited for this game. And as part of my hype for it, I thought it would be a lot of fun to go back and play through Metroid Fusion, which first released on the Game Boy Advance in 2002, but it's chronologically set immediately before the events of Metroid Dread. And with the way that retro prices are right now, this is another game where I really gotta take a look and see what it's worth. Jesus cock slobbering Christ! I'm gonna have to emulate this one, aren't I? Well, I feel like if Nintendo wanted me to buy the game from them, they would sell it to me on their current hardware. So, fuck it, I'm just gonna emulate this game. And if you enjoy the video, please let me know by giving it a thumbs up and tell me about it in the comments down below. Subscribe to the channel if you're new here, I upload every other Saturday. Now let's get started. After the events of Super Metroid, the Metroid threat has been completely eliminated from the galaxy. Samus accompanies a team of biologic researchers to the planet SR-388, previously the homeworld of the Metroids, until Samus committed genocide and killed every last one of them. They encounter a creature infected by a life form called the X parasite. Samus becomes infected by the X and is taken to the Galactic Federation for treatment. Samus is treated with Metroid DNA, which cures her of the X parasite and makes her immune to it. There are some parts of her suit which are still contaminated, and those are sent to a research station in orbit above SR-388. Later, Samus receives a distress signal from that same station and goes to investigate. When she arrives, she finds that the parts of her suit that were infected by the X have come alive, and they've turned into a copy of Samus called the SAX, or as I like to refer to it as, the Sax. And the Sax appears to have come alive and is causing all kinds of problems throughout the whole station. The gameplay is obviously Metroidvania style. I mean, the genre is partially named after this series for a good reason. You spend most of the game exploring the station, finding upgrades that unlock new areas, which will hopefully have even more upgrades that you can use to unlock even more areas. I've never been especially good at this kind of gameplay, but I always have a lot of fun with it. The Metroid series is heavily inspired by the Alien film franchise, and that inspiration is pretty strong in this entry. While you're exploring the station, you'll occasionally encounter the Sax wandering the halls of the station. And these moments are really intense because you are way too weak to fight the Sax until the end of the game. And if you try to fight it early, it will kill you. The music is very low-key and atmospheric, and in general this game makes very good use of the GBA sound chip. There are a few times where the game plays some digitized voice clips, and those clips all come through really clearly.
Warning, no entry without authorization. Warning, no entry without authorization. Warning, no entry without authorization.
And the cutscenes that play all have very impressive graphics and animation for a Game Boy Advance title. Overall, this is probably the most cinematic 2D Metroid game out there. Hell, it's one of the most cinematic 2D games that I've ever played in general. If you're ever not sure where to go next, just find the nearest nav room and the computer will tell you where to go. Samus names the computer Adam after her former commanding officer during her time as a Federation soldier. It's also pretty heavily implied that Samus and Adam did sex things with each other, and she names the computer after him because it reminds her of how strict he was. I've only ever played Super Metroid all the way through once, and that was just after I finished high school, but from what I can remember, this game is much more linear than Super Metroid ever was. And I know there are a lot of people out there that prefer a game to be more open-ended like Super Metroid is, but the linearity here in this game doesn't bother me at all. And you also have plenty of opportunities to backtrack to previous areas with new gear to see if there are any new upgrades that you can find. And the more that you explore, the more that you're rewarded. Although you really don't need to find a lot of items to finish the game, when all was said and done, I only found about half of everything when I finished it. Metroid Fusion also has a lot more bosses than I remember Super Metroid having. and there were some really good bosses in this one. One of my favorites was this robot spider guy. You have to hang from the ceiling and shoot at his weak point from above. I actually struggled with him at first, but then I figured out it was pretty easy to get him to run into the wall, which stuns him for a brief second, giving you a chance to hit the weak point. Another good one is where you have to fight this giant not robot spider, and for the most part you really just have to wait for him to open his mouth and shoot as many missiles into it as you can. If he catches you, he'll drop you from the ceiling, and this does a shit ton of damage. Then you have to fight a copy of Ridley, and he's essentially just a missile sponge. It seriously takes like 100 missiles to kill this guy. But he's also a lot easier than some of the previous bosses, which was a really nice reprieve because some of them were really fucking frustrating. Like, you have this nightmare guy who has two stages. First you have to shoot at its gravity manipulator, then it'll show its face, which you just have to shoot at until he dies. And what makes him a real pain in the ass is the way that he flies around the room. I just could not figure out this pattern for the life of me. The only reason why I was even able to beat this guy at all is that since I was emulating the game, I could abuse save states during the fight. Then the robot spider comes back for round 2, and this time he is a much bigger pain in the ass. The floor where you fight him is covered with electrified water, so anytime that you're knocked off the ceiling, you'll immediately start taking a lot more damage. Then his missiles are heat-seeking and they will follow you to the ends of the earth. The fight got a little bit easier once I figured out that you can destroy the missiles, but this was still a very hard fight. After every boss fight, an X-Parasite will emerge from the boss because they are all either infected with the parasite or they're a copy made by it. And these stages are sometimes the worst part of the entire fight. At this point you're already beaten down from the actual boss fight, and these things can do a lot of damage on their own. It is so frustrating to beat a boss only to be killed by the X that comes out of it. As Samus explores the station, she learns that the Federation has been cloning Metroids. For peaceful reasons, obviously. And she also learns that the Federation wants to do the same thing with the X-Parasite. Realizing how batshit crazy that is, she decides that she has to destroy the station and eliminate both the X-Parasite and the new Metroids. The computer initially tries to stop Samus from destroying the station, but then Samus calls the computer Adam, which I guess causes it to have a change of heart if computers have hearts. Adam tells Samus that if she can alter the trajectory of the station, she can take out the planet SR-388 as well and ensure that the X won't spread to the rest of the galaxy. On her way to change the station's orbit, Samus encounters the Sax again, and this time she's finally strong enough to fight it. And this might be the hardest boss fight in the entire game, but it's also one of the most epic 1v1 matches that I have ever seen. And when Samus is finally able to overpower the Sax, it evolves into a giant monstrous form that's actually much easier to kill than the copy of Samus. Samus sets the system self-destruct and races back to her ship. Before she can get into the ship, she is attacked by an Omega Metroid. At first, the Omega Metroid almost kills Samus, but then she's saved by the Sax at the last moment. The Omega Metroid ends up destroying the Sax, but Samus absorbs the X that comes out of it, finally giving her the Ice Beam, which she uses to make very quick work of the Omega Metroid. Even though it's really cool that they have this little homage to the final boss of Super Metroid, I think it also kind of ruins the buildup of fighting the Sax. I mean, we spend the entire game running away from the Sax, and then not having this epic 1v1 match be the final boss feels like a bit of a letdown. I just think this would have made a way better final boss than the Omega Metroid. Anyway, Samus escapes the explosion, and suspects that the Federation may try to come after her for destroying the X-Parasite before they can finish their experiments with it. I really like playing through this one. I like the atmosphere of the game, I love the gameplay, and the story really impressed me. It just really sucks that the game is so hard to come across these days, and it's expensive as hell if you are able to track down a copy of it. Like I said in the intro, if Nintendo wanted us to buy the game, they would sell it to us. So if you are looking to play through the game before Metroid Dread to get caught up on the story, download an emulator, find the ROM, and have fun with it. Thanks for watching.